Okay, so thank you everybody and welcome to the session. So my name's Kev Jones. I'm a project and partnerships manager here at UFI. We've got a great session this afternoon and we've got a great panel around how good user design makes the difference for disadvantaged learners. So just want to start off with a little overview of what do we mean by disadvantaged learners. So what we're really talking about are those that have been poorly served by or excluded from tradition or mainstream provision, or they could be at risk of exclusion. So that could be economic or digital exclusion. And typically, our target audience are those that face multiple or complex barriers. And these could be around, for a start, their priorities. Okay, so they may have second jobs, they may have childcare considerations, they may work shifts. So how do those priorities change how your design may function? Well, you know, again, it's about thinking about how do those solutions fit in with their lives and their needs. We also think about their life experiences to date. So again, many of our target audience may have you know, a poor experience in the past with learning, with qualifications, or some challenging life experiences. You know, they may be coming with different physical or mental differences, or just have experienced had a poor experience. And then finally, thinking about access as well. So, you know, we often may assume that our learners have got access to broadband or devices or, you know, email addresses, but often that's not always the case. So how can we approach design and designing solutions where we have some of these barriers? Now, a useful framework that we often use in UFI is the Design Council's double diamond. I'm just sharing this graphic on the screen now, but what this really shows is quite often projects will start in the middle. They'll start with, you know, they think they've got an understanding of the problem, and then they go away and start to develop potential solutions. And really the question is here is if your learners have got these complex needs or have a history of not engaging in learning, then you really need to go deeper. And that really starts on the left-hand side of this process. Beginning with discovery, and what we're going to hear today from some of the panel is how did they approach this discovery to really understand the problem and understand, you know, their target audience. So in terms of discovery, basically it's about really trying to understand what is the situation that your learners are in. You know, what are the motivations for them? What do they want? And essentially, what are those barriers or that mix of barriers? It's about trying to understand what their previous experience of learning is. We work with a number of projects, and I myself am working with YMCA, for example, right now. You know, who's their service users have had a very different start in life and a very different experience of learning to date. So the discovery phase is really about trying to, you know, understand that by talking to them, and, you know, testing out your own assumptions. It's about discovering their digital ability and access. As I mentioned before, you know, email addresses and access to a smartphone is not always a given. And then finally, quite like just checking in with all of the stakeholders and finding out what all of the needs of that whole group are. And then if we move into the kind of the second quadrant of that, it's about trying to bring all of those learnings back together, trying to understand, you know, what have you found out? what's different? How does this change the problem definition? What insights have you really gained? Okay, so hopefully that just sets the scene around what we mean when we talk about disadvantaged learners. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. So if Emma, Asa, and Russell, you can bring in your video and turn on your mic. Hi, Emma.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for joining.
It's an absolute pleasure. I do have severe connectivity challenges, so we'll keep everything crossed.
Okay. Yeah, I heard. So in fact, it goes back to what we're saying, right? We can't always assume perfect broadband.
I tell you, we really can't assume that, no.
Okay, and we also got Russell from Sempai and Asa. So I'm just going to stop my screen.
Hi, Kev. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, Asa.
Hello, Kev.
Okay, so just to kick off, what I'd just like to do is just do a quick round the room. Just if you could just tell me, briefly what the problem was that you were trying to solve, and what was the difference that you were trying to make when you first started this journey with UFI. And Russell, could I start with you?
Sure, yeah. So Russell Watkins, co-founder of Sempai, and we're in the manufacturing sector. So we're looking to transfer tooling capability to the hidden heroes in manufacturing, who are the people who ended up being our cohort, our vocational cohort. The problem we face to begin with is that we've been in manufacturing for many years, and the UK manufacturing has dropped from 7th in the world to 9th in the world over recent years. And we formed a hypothesis where we had a suspicion, but we thought it was down to one of 5 reasons. And we needed to go out and test that hypothesis. Either companies weren't improving fast enough in manufacturing because they were time scarce, knowledge scarce. They were sick of new initiatives, and 2 other reasons. So the problem we faced was, why is UK getting weaker and not improving fast enough, particularly in productivity?
Okay, thanks, Russell. Emma, so same question really. What did you set out in terms of the problem that you were trying to solve, or the difference you were trying to make?
Okay, so Digital Unite has been supporting people with digital inclusion and digital skills for many years, and the problem that we thought we would like to try and support was getting people with mild to moderate learning difficulties into work. And the problem, as we saw it, was, and through research, was that they didn't always have access to the best digital skills. They didn't always have access to the best workplace support and skills building. They didn't always have the best access to CV building and putting things like volunteering and work experience on CVs in order to get a job. We were approaching our project to design something that would help support and remedy some of those barriers.
Okay, thank you. And Asa?
Hello. So go on.
No, I was just going to say, so again, just a quick overview of Mad Lab, and again, the kind of core problem that you were looking to solve.
Sure. So I'm Asa from Mad Lab in Greater Manchester. It's short for Manchester Digital Laboratory, and we are a digital and creative non-profit. Specializes in community-facing digital innovation, and our problem is we've been running a very successful online digital skills program for young people and the kind of disadvantaged learners that you were talking about earlier. So particularly sort of working in parts of Manchester with high risk of digital exclusion. And particularly with people who are afforded fewer life opportunities than sort of typical STEM graduate. And the real difference we're trying to make is trying to link up those kinds of learners and those sorts of people with a booming digital industry in the region. Greater Manchester is one of the fastest growing tech regions in Europe. And so really that's a huge opportunity for kind of reaching out to young people who might otherwise not have had those kind of opportunities, and really kind of link them into into what's going on. And I guess our problem is that we've been very successful with this program. I'm a firm believer in what Paul Graham from Y Combinator describes as doing things that don't scale, and then working out how to scale them later. So our problem has been that it's been really, really successful, but now the challenge is to grow the impact of the program, but without killing its soul.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, three quite different problems that you're trying to solve. Russell, I wonder if I could come back to you and just ask how you approached the problem of trying to understand the real problem, how you engaged with your target audience.
So we for a start, we knew that we had to be careful of confirmation bias. Even though we've been in the industry for a long time, we had to go back to our potential users and buyers and ask them, what do you think the problem is? So we took this hypothesis of they're either time scarce, knowledge scarce, money scarce, they're faith scarce, as in they've been let down too many times by initiatives, or there's just natural human resistance to improve the business. And we sketched it out for 15 of our existing clients on a whiteboard. We went to their sites and said, what do you think? And we harvested the feedback, and very, very clearly it came back knowledge scarcity is the issue, particularly around a certain level in the business who are team leaders. Now, team leaders are the hidden heroes in manufacturing. Love a team leader, hated school, don't like classrooms, very good processing power, but they learn through their hands. They are typical vocational learners in a job where they're time starved, they're not paid particularly well, but they are really, really smart people. So we took that knowledge scarcity and the fact it was around the team leader, and we put out a survey to team leaders and asked them, what are your pains and gains? What do you like? What don't you like about the way that your job currently works? We harvested that information, and with that and what we knew already, we created a user persona for the team leader, like psychographic, demographic, all sorts of graphic, to try to flesh out a typical user. And based on that, we then use that as our input to create a learning pedagogy, and then to help us create a low-cost, low-fidelity proof of concept to put in front of them. I could go on for hours, but I'm going to stop there.
Well, yeah, we're gonna kind of cover the second stage of that, really, in prototyping in shortly. But Emma, again, when you went out and started to speak with your learners, did you learn anything different? Did it help reshape your understanding of the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't just talk to the potential learners, we also talked to a range of employers who had a track record or certainly signalled interest in welcoming people with learning disabilities into their workforce. And so with both the potential learners and the employers, we did quite extensive interviewing, and we also sat in on training sessions being run by those employers at the time. We wanted to really understand what learning styles suited the people with learning disabilities and what didn't, what assumptions the employers were making about the skills acquisition journey for those potential employees. We wanted to understand whether the current models of skills transfer were working for the target audience, irrespective of whether they were about digital skills, but also including digital skills. And so we did quite a lot of work with both the people with learning disabilities and the employers to discover those things. And it was a really fascinating process which confirmed some of our assumptions, but also really challenged some of the assumptions. And we were quite easily able to surface really fundamental mismatches between employer expectation around training requirements and digital skills training requirements and delivery requirements in terms of where these employers thought they should be starting and supporting the learner journey. It did not correlate with the expectations and the wishes of the people with learning disabilities at all. So that was a very, very useful part of the discovery process.
Wow, okay, interesting. And Asa, as well, back to you.
Yeah, so I think we well, first of all, absolutely love the double diamond. We find it really, really useful, like time and time again, because it's a really nice thing that you can point towards where you are in the process and have that really clear idea of how you can really become open. You can properly open up your mind and ask like lots and lots of different questions and constantly be reevaluating what it is that you're doing. But it's not a process that just keeps on opening up. There's also, you've got this filtering process and this real kind of sort of clarifying kind of stage to it as well. So, I mean, this is something that we lean on, and we're continuing to use the double diamond as well throughout. I mean, in terms of different kind of models, so, you know, we hear a lot about like user-centered and kind of like learner-centered approaches, which is really, really key. And coming back to like knowing a lot about, well, quite a lot of our learners as they've been going through our program, to the extent that, you know, we've been partnering with those kind of device programs, so that when people haven't had laptops, we've been like physically going and working with device programs, getting computers and taking them around to people's houses. So, you know, there's like, we know our learners on that kind of level. But then the other side of it is also something that I'm really interested in hearing more about, is what's called systemic innovation and mission-oriented innovation. And really that's also, as well as it's about like sort of understanding the kind of like learners' experience, for us, it's understanding the wider context of how we can grow the impact of what we're doing. What are the sort of patterns, what are the drivers that can take us from where we are to reaching the kind of scale, the kinds of numbers of learners that we want to reach. And so part of what we were kind of exploring was about sort of validating and working really closely with our groups of learners. We've got a really highly engaged base. So we've been going out, we did hours and hours of interviews, lots and lots of workshops. I did a quick count of post-its. I think we generated 800 post-its across the workshops throughout the define and the deliver process. And yeah, so just like really kind of sort of getting to grips. But as well as learners, also we've got an amazing volunteering base as well, and we're quite community rooted, so we're linked into all the kind of meetups, sort of grassroots kind of learning organizations as well, groups like Code With and Code Club as well, which is aimed at younger people, but then we're also looking at working with like adults as well. And boot camps as well, so which we see as kind of being we're sort of part of the same kind of ecosystem as that.
And also,
so yeah.
Am I right to think that you didn't just focus on your discovery on just your learners, but also those, you know, you're pretty reliant on those, you know, your mentors and the wider sort of support network. So your project was also about like, how do you design something that's going to keep those, you know, those mentors and those volunteers engaged, right?
Yes, exactly. So how do we decentralize away from us being the absolute, just like, you know, we're always at the core of it, but how do we create the right kind of habits, the right kind of sort of movement within our learning community overall, between volunteers, industry, learners, to really kind of sort of create the kinds of learning habits that we really want to see. And it's showing a lot of a lot of progress.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement that understanding or going out and engaging with the process of discovery is really valuable. And I wonder if you could just maybe go back to you, Russell, to just share how did those learnings then start to shape and start to refine what you were going to build and what that looked like in terms of, you know, a prototype.
Okay, so it's probably worth prefacing by saying that it's no surprise as lean manufacturing people that we like lean startup principles. And we were very keen not to spend a lot of money on something and put a bow around it and go ta-da to our user cohort and stakeholders and not present what they wanted. We're very much into build it, iterate it, and improve it as we go. So we really wanted, based off of the feedback we got from the team leaders we talked to, the surveys, the interviews, and the hypothesis testing, we created a very low fidelity proof of concept. I think it cost 500 quid on a tablet that we could just scroll the screens and just say, what do you think of this? Has it got legs? Do you want to learn this way? Do you want your people to learn this way? And that gave us sufficient confidence that we could go away from both the user and the potential buyer perspective and design some requirements and finesse our learning pedagogy, and also make sure that we could put the right learning design treatment together and a playbook. So we did kind of two major workshops in tandem. We did a learning design workshop. This particular cohort, who are very busy, micro-learning is essential, don't like classrooms, engage them, make it easy to pick up and put down. How do we design that side of it? And also, how do we get the technical architecture in place that designs a prototype with UFI support that helps us test 2 modules, is functional, helps them learn and make an improvement as they go, but isn't too sexy and doesn't bake too much in with too much plumbing back end, just enough. Yeah. And those 2 workshops were really interesting, running them in tandem. And the key, I would say the key competence for us, the key inputs were, I've trained thousands of people around the world face-to-face in groups. It took me a while to realize that digital learning design is very different. So the digital learning designer was really critical to reorganize the way we do stuff. And a technical lead who has one eye on the commercials and one eye in reality, but also wants to make something good. They helped us put a prototype together that was just good enough and got good results to prove the principle, but wasn't perfect.
Yep. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, working with my projects, there's often there can often be a tension with what's good enough, and people thinking, well, you know, it needs to look really slick and professional before I'm even ready to release this, you know, my baby out into the world. And it's really important to try to say, look, we're just testing. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a clickable PowerPoint or even paper-based at this point. You just need to test, you know, the journey, the flow. Does it work? Does it make sense?
Indeed, and there's some great learnings about people are quite forgiving of some visuals. It's certainly in manufacturing. We put some time into UX, but not much money. But we put time into it. And people were very forgiving of the visuals, but they weren't. We knew from the start, from advice, they wouldn't be very forgiving of the audio because they're in factories which are very noisy places. So knowing what people are forgiving of in your particular industry or your area is really helpful in just making it good enough.
Yep. Okay, and Emma, again, you talked briefly about, you know, there were some big surprises when you went out, and in terms of that discrepancy or expectations. So could you just share how did that, you know, inform or shape what you ended up looking to build?
Yeah, sure. So one of the key, I guess what became the core principle of the service we designed and the training we designed overall was that we involved the people with learning disabilities themselves in the design of the content and the delivery of designed a cascade model. So it was effectively a peer support-led training environment that could be supported by the employers and could also be supported by organizations who represent and support people with learning disabilities not just within the employment context. So MenCap was a key partner in this. And we worked with RICS, which is a disability specialist as well, and they have a group of people with learning disabilities who do some excellent discovery work around technology in relationship to sort of everyday life. So we put all these things together and use that pool of people to create audio and video content by the people with learning disabilities themselves to support others with their digital skills acquisition, their pre-employment skills acquisition, and also crucially to allow those people to support each other and mentor each other around practice, because this became a really obvious thing that the employer cohort hadn't quite taken on board in relation to the digital skills bit. So giving people the time and opportunity to practice the digital skills they'd got, to role play things, especially again around interviews, around CV building. And then this sort of double win of this process was that we could put those experiences into the CVs of the people who were doing the skills of their peers, and they also built up their CVs in relation to gaining work and employment as well. So the whole process became incredibly sort of fertile, I think, around that model. Then we had a slight enter scene stage left experience with COVID, because the route we had established for employers to take on the people who we had been given the additional training to closed down sort of almost overnight, for reasons you can all imagine. And that was quite a challenge in terms of the end of that journey, the end point of the skills acquisition, and this very fertile environment we created for that. That was sort of suddenly blocked off to us. But one of the excellent things that appeared in its place almost was that we could cascade that learning and that skills program led by the people, the learners with learning disabilities themselves, into all sorts of other community settings where a lot more work was actually being done around the digital skills piece because of COVID. So it was a kind of weird serendipitous occasion of having the route you thought you were going blocked off by, you know, something completely out of your control, which actually then opened up and anticipated at the point of starting. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
it makes complete sense.
That was a really, yeah, it was very, very pleasing outcome for everyone, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, in some respects, the sort of silver lining or the acceleration that COVID's had on that you know, adoption of tech has just been massive. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time just showing the second half of essentially of the double diamond, so that, you know, the audience doesn't feel like, well, what else to come. So I've just got just a few slides on, let me just share my screen again. Here we go. So we've spent some time talking about the discovery and the definition of pulling it back down to again. So really the second half now is about, you know, develop and deliver. So, and by develop, we don't really mean going into full-on core build here. We're talking about developing, you know, a range of solutions. So this is really a sort of exploration of the ideas, going back to Russell's comment of actually, like, would this work, and finding out what are the most important aspects. Okay, audio is clearly critical. We wouldn't have learned that if we'd held on to this and gone down into some, you know, 6-month development cycle and then only discovered that at the time of launch. You know, keeping an open mind at this point and still being creative, still thinking really widely about what other options are available to how to solve this. And then finally, again, back to your point, Asa, this doesn't just keep expanding. How can we start to build this down to something that we can actually iteratively test, get feedback, think about, you know, what was the impact of that? Okay, the learner said they liked it, but actually, did it really move the needle in terms of what we initially set out to do? So that's just to kind of close off the double diamond. And then it would just be useful to think, again, Russell, you're probably, I guess, the most advanced in terms of your UFI journey with us. So could you just share your experiences of that build stage and of that you know, that second phase?
Sure, yeah. I'd like, because time's quite scarce, I'd like to focus on the deliver if I can, because I think the deliver comes back to the very start. So I mentioned at the very start confirmation bias, and it's particularly strong in me. The force is strong with me in terms of that. So we had to strip out my personality and my co-founder's personality and our views on what we thought the market needed. So when we designed all the way through, we had in mind from the very start, what is it we want to test? What are we looking to test assumption-wise? And we had 5 things in mind all the way through the journey. One was, will the user be engaged in using our prototype? Will they perform while using it? So that's engagement and progress. And we knew we wanted to track that quantitatively. So early on, we decided to build enough data analytics, SCORM API into the back end of our prototype to be able to harness data from our users. Number 3, did they want the problem solved, both the user and the buyer? Did they want the problem solved this way? And were we targeting the correct person in terms of the team leader? And those last 3, we knew we could get qualitatively. But to do that, we would have to do it via interview, structured interview with questions that were preset. So we did the build. We knew we wanted to measure momentum, which for us was engagement plus progression. And then we took it out to 6 of our existing global manufacturing clients, tested with 20 users over 4 months, and got some very good results. We personally, it was during COVID, so we had to be very clear about getting in and out of factories safely. We tested with them, did something like 7,000 miles in 3-4 months. And really got good data. They made an average of 50% improvements in their skills, and they saved £2,000 per user per business. But wow. Even more importantly, the really interesting thing was that they liked it, but they also gave us what they didn't like. And we got a list of 105 improvement ideas, some big, some small, some fixes, some I'd like to see more of this. But that last bit was really valuable for us because it helped to inform our roadmap.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that can also be really challenging, again, with my own user group, with learners, is you put something in front of them and often they can be too polite and they'll just say yes. And actually that's not that helpful. So you have to think about how can we design that focus group to make it easy for them to be honest and give useful feedback.
It's true. And on the structured interviews, they were too nice, even though I told them not to be. On the anonymous, easy, well-designed, quick survey, they were a bit more brutal. So that was good.
All right. And Emma, so thinking about your actual development and of the solution, what were your key points that you'd like to share?
I think for us, what we had confirmed to us almost resoundingly was that the peer-to-peer model for the target learners and employees was absolutely what these people wanted and the way they wanted to learn. And that was proven kind of categorically through the work we did. That involving the people with learning disabilities in the development of the curriculum, they wanted to support them in this journey, was phenomenally successful. And we saw benefits out with the program, I think, in terms of the sort of excitement of being involved in something like that, because I think for many of the people we were working with, they hadn't actually been part of an immersive process like this, where they were not just listened to, but they kind of were almost allowed to drive the process, because it was them we wanted to work for, and we wanted our solution to work for. So that was actually, I think, a very empowering experience, and it was a very, it was a very good experience for Digital Unite to go through as well. I think we found that with the right mechanisms and support in place, that peer model is very good at sustaining and nourishing the skills development and journey of the learners themselves, almost without much touching once you set it running, and continuing to do user testing on every step of it, not just the micro learning, but the way we were evaluating skills and progression within that, the tools that worked for the learners, the tools that didn't work for the learners. I think the next big thing for us is to go back almost right to the beginning and re-engage with the COVID. So that will be really interesting for us. So we kind of go all the way back to the start of the diamond, you know, and sort of 2 years later, in effect, where we're kind of back to the same set of problems and challenges for the employer base as well. So
yeah, completely. And it always surprises me as well that when you're speaking to the users, sometimes you feel like it's an imposition to go and take their time. And then they feel really thankful for, but then they also feel really part of involved, and they think that their DNA is now in the end solution.
Yeah.
Really valuable.
And that infectious enthusiasm will drive take up in a way you can never plan for, you know, because
we're going to have to finish there, Emma, because I think we're out of time. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody